want to welcome you all to The Gateway.
The Gateway is a video podcast directed and hosted by staff members of Somerset Community College's student newspaper, The Bridge.
This is The Gateway.
Hello, SEC, and thank you for joining us for a very special episode today. I am your host, Eli Parker.
Miguel Sanabria.
And Lori Abbott.
And with us today is our special guest, Miss Venus Evans. On top of being an SEC alumni, she's a tribal member of the Mi'kmaq Nation, correct?
Yes.
As well as involved with several Native American and social justice groups. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Quay.
Awesome. So just my first question would be, how your family came to arrive here in Kentucky?
In Kentucky, okay. It all began with my grandmother, Ida. She was born in Woodstock, New Brunswick, Canada. Her mother was Maliseet, which the native translation is Wolastoqey. Her father was Mi'kmaq from Bear River, Nova Scotia. When grandmother became of age, she met and married a non-status, I don't want to say white, but he was a non-status native white man from, I said white anyway, from Maine. And there's a long story behind that, but she met and married her second husband, my grandfather, who was from here in Kentucky. And when they married, they moved here. And it was the late 40s, early 50s when she came here, and that's how come us to be in Kentucky.
Okay, awesome.
Can you sort of tell us a little bit about your family's experiences as Native Americans?
As Native Americans, whenever I was growing up, we were probably the only Native American family in the area where we lived. We lived in Laurel County and Jackson County, and we were probably the only family that I even recall that were Native American. And back then we called each other Indian. So for the most part, my mother got labeled as black by the communities. And it was just one of those things where we just didn't talk about it, especially to other folks. We just kind of kept it to ourselves. So, but as I was growing up, and as you can see, I'm fair-skinned, and I would always tell people I am Native American. I am, and because I couldn't say that I was Cherokee or Shawnee or the typical tribes that everyone knew about, and I would tell them I'm Mi'kmaq, they would dismiss me as being a phony. So yeah. So it's something that I've stood up for and advocated for myself all my life.
And going back to your grandmother, we understand that the Indian Removal Act of 1867 had an effect on her. How so?
Actually, that was the Indian Act. It's not Indian Act of 1867 because, that was pertained to Canada. So that was for First Nations. That's kind of like the Native American tribes here. But in Canada, it's First Nations. And that dealt with them specifically. And what was your question again?
It had an effect on your grandmother, correct?
It did, because there was gender discrimination within that act, that if a First Nations woman married a non-status man, whether he was white or a non-status Native American or First Nations, she would automatically lose her First Nation status, which means her Indian identity. She could no longer identify as Native American or First Nations. She could not have property. She could not she was no longer what she'd been all of her life, and that was an Indigenous woman. She could not identify as that. So she had no rights. And in fact, when she married her first husband, Robert, who was from Maine, she lost her Canadian citizenship. So there she had no country, she had no family. And when he died, and she was widowed at 28 with 3 children, she couldn't go back to Canada to her family. So she was by herself. So, that's another story probably for another time, but she lost those children, and it's, So she had some bad experiences as a Native woman back in the turn of the century of, the 20th century. So, yeah, it affected her profoundly. She withheld our culture from us. She said that it would not get us anywhere if we tried to learn it, that it wouldn't, help us in life, just to embrace the white dominant society and carry on. That way you will survive.
Dang.
Wow. So you were involved in a lot of extracurricular activities on the campus here at SCC, and many groups afterwards. What kind of inspiration did your grandmother give to you to?
Well, I did, and I still do, draw on her strength, because she was the oldest of her family, and she had several siblings. And of course, at that time, they didn't live very long, is what I'm trying to say tactfully, is they didn't live very long. She was the oldest, and for her to leave Canada, leave her home, lose her country, lose her identity, and still survive to raise a family and to make sure that we would survive has been my inspiration. And in fact, here recently, I made a Facebook post honoring my grandmother, and a distant cousin commented, because his mother and my grandmother were sisters, and he said,
Wow.
in my opinion, Ida was the strongest of all the sisters.
Beautiful.
So these groups that your grandmother gave you the strength to join and be a part of, do you want to tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. In fact, the reason that I'm involved with a couple was birthed right here at Somerset Community College. While I was serving as president to the Multicultural Diversity Club, I was asked to bring in someone to speak during Native American Heritage Month. And so, of course, I get on the internet, thank goodness for technology, and I get to looking, and I found a group here in the Southeast region, and I invited them to come in and speak. And her name is Helen Dancer, and we were talking, and she said, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, because we arranged all this via phone. And she said, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I told her, I said, I'm with a federally recognized tribe, and I was giving her the whole lowdown, and she said, girl, why aren't you on the commission? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And I go, I don't know. I guess I need to. Now. And she goes, yes. So it's from that introduction with her to come and speak during Native American Heritage Month led to my appointment to the commission, being president of the Kentucky Indigenous People, and stuff has just kind of snowballed from there. So, yeah, it has really, for me, I've always said this, that I am my grandmother's voice, because she didn't have one during her lifetime.
I love that.
So everywhere I go, I always make a point to speak of her. In fact, my regalia skirt, my ribbon skirt, has her on it, an image of her on it. So, yeah, I take her wherever I go, because she is my strength.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
And so these other groups that you said you started getting involved with, we are aware that you're a part of so many more than probably all the fingers on my hand. Is there any you want to touch on? Because there's so many on like a local, state, and even a nationwide level.
Yeah, the one that I'm really proud to be a part of is the Governor's Interstate Indian Council. And this one is nationwide, and you are appointed by your state governor to serve on this commission, this council. And we meet once a year, and we go over things that we have done and things that have happened in our state involving the Native communities. So we do have a lot to talk about in Kentucky, because our commission is unfunded. So everything that we do is on our dime and on our time. So yeah, I'm really excited, and I'm secretary for that that council. And I've met a lot of people from Hawaii to Alaska to Maryland, North Carolina. North Carolina, they love us. They go, come on down anytime.
Awesome.
And in fact, we went down for their Unity Conference a couple of years ago, and one of the delegates with the North Carolina Indian Affairs Commission introduced us. They was like, "Stand up! Here's our sisters from Kentucky." So, yeah, it's a community that I have longed for, and I want to, have that here in Kentucky for all the Native Americans that live here that don't otherwise have it. Because, according to the 2020 census, there's over 12,000 that identify as with one tribe. And when something comes up or whatever, they have to go back to their homeland. They have to go back to their homeland for health care or whatever. So I would like for us to just have fellowship in Kentucky, because they're so far away from their homelands anyway.
Right.
And I know I kind of got off a little subject there.
So how do you feel SEC helped prepare you for your journey?
SEC, by giving me the opportunity to serve as student government president, I was in leadership there. I led several different things, and being in the different clubs gives you a sense of leadership and belonging that you can take and use with you in these things that I'm doing with the Native community. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that you would like people to know about Native Americans that a lot of people just don't know?
Well, specifically for the Native Americans in Kentucky, I do. Since Kentucky does not have federal or state recognized tribes, we basically don't exist. So with that being said, we have no representation. We have no voice. We pretty much are underground or in the closet or, because if we're not acknowledged, we're not here, so we don't matter. And that's not the case. We contribute, we have jobs, we contribute to numerous things within the state with our labor, with our arts, with our culture, with our heritage, whatever. We are contributors, and we'd like to be identified as such. And I'm not saying, when I'm speaking my truth and my story, and I'm not speaking for everybody else. But for me, and I lost my train of thought. I apologize.
It's all good.
But yeah, what was the question again? So I can circle back around to it.
It's about what people might not know about Native Americans, but since you did bring up the lack of representation, what sort of legislation are your groups working towards to maybe give Native Americans that opportunity to have a voice?
Oh, thank you. That's a very good question. Just most recently, there was a House bill in the legislature. It was House Bill 88, and it was advocating for true historical instruction in African American and Native American history in the state of Kentucky, which would be introduced into the K through 12 curriculums. And it didn't gain any traction, but this is the second time it's been in legislation. We did have some meaningful conversations with legislators that would, there again, and it's kind of surprising that when you're speaking to your legislature and you tell them who you are and what your ethnicity is, and they're like, "Oh, I wasn't aware that you all were here," and it's like, yeah. And I even had one legislator say, I apologize. I have completely overlooked this group. But we were told that more than likely that dealing with education, it would be something that wouldn't gain traction. But with that being said, we have made connections and opened a lot of eyes to the fact that we are overlooked in Kentucky and that we have a right to be represented in education, because education is key. That's I know that's a cliche, but it is. If people knew that we're here, we've always been here, and not necessarily the ancestral tribes that were here, then we'll have that voice. Because I recently heard that if we don't have a place at the table, then we're on the menu.
Wow.
And do you feel the media has helped at all showing the representation for Native American people at all?
The media in Kentucky is beginning to be more inclusive and making sure that Native American issues and things that are going on are addressed. And you'll see it more and more in print and on television. So that's good.
That's good.
I think that it's finally coming around to and especially circling back around to the 2020 census, according to that, there's over 91,000 Native Americans who make Kentucky their home. So, we're a big contingency, and we need to have that representation.
So what are your thoughts on some social media portrayal of Native Americans?
Such as?
Maybe TV shows or movies?
Well, that's starting to come around too.
Yeah.
Especially if you get Hulu. And
Hulu.
And you watch Reservation Dogs. That is hilarious. I mean, there's times I'm sitting there just laughing, going, "Yep, that happened in my family. That right there, yep, that happens right there." And I was telling my friends about it. I said, "You've got to watch this. You've got to watch it." And they said, "Venus, would we get it as much as you do?" And I said, "Probably not."
They're not in on the inside joke there.
But it's starting to come around. We're seeing more representation. We're seeing, and especially in Reservation Dogs, you have got a director, a writer, and all these. It's all Native American, and we're starting to break into the music, mainstream music. There is a Mi'kmaq recording artist out of Canada. His name is Q052. Check him out. Hip hop.
Will do.
He's
Awesome.
great.
Okay.
Superman. He's got some really good stuff. Really good stuff. Check him out.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna see him in my car on Spotify later listening.
And really good, really powerful stuff. And plus, look, we've got the first Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland. I mean, let's go. And then Sharice Davis is in there. We're having governors now. And if you notice, for the most part, it's women.
There you go.
And in Native culture, matriarchy is our form of government. Who better to lead than the women? And in Native culture, in oral tradition, the stories are that in the 7th generation that the women will rise up and lead. So you look around and see what's going on.
That's what I like to hear.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
Miguel, when you start hiding, let's
I didn't know.
But no, this is all wonderful and great. I'm glad you all are finally getting up in the ranks and getting all this representation. But to me, at least, this is just so baffling that it's just now happening. Like, why do you think it's taken this long?
Well, I think because the misconception is, especially for the state of Kentucky, Native Americans were never here. They never made Kentucky their home, which is not true. There's villages and communities being unearthed that shows that, yes, we were here. Of course, now that's your ancestral tribes, which is the Shawnee, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Yuchi, Osage, and there's others. But for the most part, the state kind of recognizes that. I mean, this is my opinion. They see that, but now that they have these numbers showing that, there's more than just Shawnee and Cherokee and all that are living here, that we're starting to get that visibility.
Good, I'm glad. I'm sorry it's taken this long.
Yeah, well, I'm 59.
Don't look at you. Younger.
I'm 59, and I have been fighting this all my life. But just in the past 6 or 8 years, it's really gained steam. So,
I'm glad.
for me.
I just one final question in terms of the millennials generation. What are your hopes for them, and what do you see? Do you think they? I mean, I know you're taking a lead role, but do you think they're going to be coming behind you? And
That's my hope that they are, because there's a lot, and probably all of you in this room probably have oral histories and stories in your family about Native American ancestors, and I am a firm believer in, and a lot of this was lost. A lot of it was lost because, if you were found out, you were removed. So, and I'm a firm believer in, if you don't know who you are and you don't know where you came from, you can't get to where you're going.
That's it.
And I've always had this pulling, and it's kind of like this, like, if you would, a preacher who has a calling to preach. I've always had this draw and this pull to stand up for my people. And it goes back to where my grandmother didn't have a voice. And my thoughts are, if these young folks can tap in and touch that inner part of them that is Native, because let's face it, there's a lot of us have ancestry. If they can tap into that and find out where they come from, that they will embrace this and take it forward.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, Ms. Evans, we want to thank you very much for coming in and shedding a lot of light to
We're
what
done?
is
We're done? Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
time flies. We're having
Oh
fun,
my
right?
gosh. I was just getting started.
But no, really, thank you very much for coming in and shedding a lot of light on what is an overlooked culture, and we just hope for the best for you and your people as well. And I'm glad you all are finally getting the recognition you all rightfully deserve.
Well, I thank you very much for inviting me. It's platforms such as this that gets the word out there, that gets us recognized, that gives us a voice. You're having us at the table. You are listening. You're not quick to downplay it or come in with something that might overshadow what I'm trying to tell today. So, yeah, thank you all for reaching out. And anytime you want me to come back, I will. Maybe I can have a few more things to add to it.
There we go, yes.
Absolutely.
See updates in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I would love that. And before we close, I heard an elder say that to keep our language alive, we need to share it. And I've done this before. I would like to teach you a couple of words in our language, and you can carry it with you. In Mi'kmaq, when we say hello, we say kwe. And when we say thank you, we say walalin. So walalin.
For more information on SCC student newspaper, The Bridge, or the Gateway Video Podcast, email us at sccthebridge@yahoo.com or contact one of the course advisors.
This is the Gateway, signing out.